Hi everyone, this is Kyle, and we got some more interesting news rolling in regarding Disney's upcoming live-action adaptation of the Snow White movie that they made in 1937. This is from The Hollywood Reporter. Snow White director's son criticizes insulting Disney remake starring Rachel Zegler. David Haddon calls the company's reboot woke, pathetic, following Zegler criticizing his father's 1937 film as extremely dated. So it begins. Disney's live-action remake of 1937's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs doesn't come out until next year, but a culture war surrounding the film, titled Snow White, is already at full boil. So the first thing it says, first, conservatives took issue with the casting of Latina star Rachel Zegler, West Side Story, as a character described in the original Brothers Grimm story having skin as white as snow, and the production changing the formerly titular Seven Dwarfs into a diverse collection of magical creatures of varying sizes and genders. Yeah, so regarding them casting a Latina star, Rachel Zegler, as Snow White, I mean, this is another case of race swapping, which is a very common thing that we see now from Hollywood. I mean, you can almost predict in every movie that they're going to do it now, but, Snow White, yes, she is described as having skin white as snow, and the original fairy tale, it was a German fairy tale, and so you look at that logically, the context is Snow White is going to be German in appearance, which, what race or ethnicity are people in Europe generally? They're white. Yeah, I mean, people at Disney, people in Hollywood, they are doing this sort of thing so often now. Probably the best way I've heard it described, somebody from Bounding into Comics described it this way, race swapping essentially as the laziest form of virtue signaling. And I would say that this whole race swapping thing, it's a very common baiting game that people in Hollywood, people in the entertainment industry play, where they'll take a previously existing character, usually someone who's white, and then they'll turn him into a different race, or whether it makes any sense or not. Usually, or a lot of times, it might be, say, a European fairy tale, something like Snow White here, for example. Again, Snow White, it's a German fairy tale, so the context of that is Snow White is going to be German in appearance or European in appearance. So people in the entertainment industry, with their obsession over diversity, their obsession over identity politics and all that kind of stuff, they'll take a previously existing character, usually one who's white, and they'll change their race. If it's male, they might change their gender, things of that sort, and then they simply wait for people to criticize it, for people to say, look, this is not what the original character looked like, and then they pounce on it, and then they start calling them whatever istophobe word it is. They'll change that character, and if you have a problem with it, or if you think it does not make any sense, then you're an istophobe, you're a disgusting human being, you're a worse human being than a certain leader of Germany during the 1930s and 40s. You get the idea. And me, I've stated this before, and I'm not the first person at all to state this. If you want to have more diversity and representation or inclusion or whatever other buzzwords they use, by itself, there's nothing wrong with that. But the argument I make, and that a lot of other people out there who criticize it make, is make a new story. Make new stories, make new characters. But people in Hollywood, they're not doing that. Instead, they're doing a lazy form of virtue signaling, which is they're taking previously existing characters and then they're race swapping them, gender swapping them, that sort of thing. And again, they wait till people criticize it, and then they pounce on it, and then they call them whatever istophobe words. They start attacking fans, things like that. I mean, it frankly is a real disgusting game that people in Hollywood are playing in this regard. And frankly, if they do feel that certain races or certain ethnicities are underrepresented, by deciding to just race swap characters rather than make a new character or make a new story, if you ask me, you're essentially saying that these underrepresented groups, whoever they are, it's not worth my time to give them their own original character at all. Now, a lot of people will ask, why is it that they don't make new stories, why they don't make new characters? And I think the first reason that people will come up with is people in the entertainment industry, people in Hollywood, people currently running Disney, they don't have any creative ability. And yes, I do agree with that. I've said this before in some previous videos I've done, and I'm going to be saying this a lot more. The people at Disney, the people in Hollywood, the people in the entertainment industry, they are not entertainers, they are activists. They're woke activists, they're left-wing activists, they're feminist activists. And the fact that they're activists first and they're just disguising as entertainers, yes, that means that they don't really have any creative ability. But personally, I think it goes a lot further than that. I think that, these activists, they look at all these movies, all these stories that have come out before them, and they genuinely do not like any of them at all. They have no respect for anything from the past at all. In their mind, stories, fairy tales, things like that, they're very white, they're very male, they feature men rescuing women. And so, they're toxic, they're problematic, and there are a whole bunch of other buzzwords like that. And so they feel like they need to correct, or they need to change these stories, or they need to right the wrongs, or what they think are wrongs of the past in terms of storytelling. I think at the end of the day, that's probably the biggest reason why they're making so many changes to all these original stories, whether it be making sure that a princess does not get rescued by a man, because we can't have that anymore, that's not politically correct, whether it be race swapping or gender swapping, because having a white male as a main character, we can't, that's not politically correct now, and so on and so forth. And then you have the new Seven Dwarves over here, which, they made some changes to those. What on earth is this? Okay, so the article continues. The 22-year-old Zegler caused a stir when a flurry of comments from late last year recently resurfaced that suggested she didn't like the original film and that the new movie would take a very different approach to the iconic character. And those comments that they're referring to there, we got them right here. I'll play them for you real fast. I think it starts about right here.
So, I know that you've told me before that your version of Snow White is different, and it's more of a 2022 version of Snow White. What did you mean by that?
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that.
Yeah, essentially insulting the original Snow White movie. And there were a couple other things that she said, but I'm not going to play it all for you. But essentially what she's saying is the old Snow White movie, it was problematic, it was dated, but don't worry, we're fixing all the problems with the original Snow White movie, which, essentially you're saying, I don't like the Snow White, or the original Snow White movie. Well, it's like, okay, then why are you acting as Snow White then? Now, one thing that I keep in mind regarding Rachel Zegler is she was 21 years old at the time she made these comments. Now, it doesn't completely excuse her at all for saying these things, of course. It might cause me to, I'd say it probably causes me to be just a little less harsh on her. On one hand, when you're 21, she's 22 now. You are an adult now, so, you kind of should know what to say and what not to say, but at the same time, she is a young adult at that, so she's not going to have the same amount of experience as people who've been working in the industry for years in regards to knowing what you should say publicly and what you should not say publicly. So yeah, that's something where you judge that for yourself. Yeah. So these comments they surfaced, I don't know what, a year or so ago now. I think September of last year. So basically a year. And then they started resurfacing very recently. That's led to a lot of backlash against the actress, against the current direction they're taking for Snow White. And then you had Entertainment Tonight here, shortly after, or not too long ago, they posted a video on here somewhere. So, oh my God. What the hell is that? Jennifer Lawrence being a chaotic queen in these no hard feelings bloopers is just more evidence that she's the funniest person alive. Says who she's the funniest person alive? Says who? Those of you watching, do you think Jennifer Lawrence is the funniest person alive? I don't know, you tell me that. But look at this face. If I move the mouse too close to this video, then you can't see the still image, but look at that picture right there. My God, that freaks me out. What was it called again? Jennifer Lawrence being a chaotic queen? No. I don't want anything to do with chaotic queens, thank you very much. Alright, where was I? What was I doing? Oh, I think this was the video that they posted where they were trying to portray Rachel Zegler in a much better light as her being very grateful for the acting opportunity she had, things of that sort. And the timing of it, it came shortly after her comments were resurfacing, so yeah, I doubt it's a coincidence. Okay, so the article here continues. Okay, so Zegler says she's not going to be dreaming about true love. Zegler told Variety in September she's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, brave, and true. She previously told Vanity Fair, people are making these jokes about ours being the PC Snow White, where it's like, yeah, it is because it needed that. No, it does not need that. She told EW, the original is extremely dated when it comes to the ideas of women being in roles of power and what a woman is fit for in the world. And told Extra TV, the original tune came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird, I'm not going to say it the way she said it. So we didn't do that this time. Again, the old Snow White, it had problems, but don't worry, we're going to correct it. Even though you guys love the original classic Snow White tale. Don't worry. We, the activists working in entertainment, we recognize that it had problems, but don't worry, we're going to correct them. Which, I mean, the comment she makes, Snow White's not going to be dreaming about true love. It's, this whole woke lunacy that's taken over entertainment. Feminism is a very big staple of wokeness. And the trend that we're seeing is that every single female character needs to be a strong, fierce girl boss queen. It's not politically correct to have a woman fall in love anymore. It's not politically correct for a woman to be feminine and romantic, because that means that she's falling short of being a strong woman girl boss queen, which every female character needs to be now. And another comment they were making, I mean, they've made this in a number of places. Zegler, Gal Gadot, I mean, they've been emphasizing that Snow White is not going to be saved by a prince. Which, I mean, one of the problems that feminists in entertainment have with fairy tales is, they see a bunch of women being saved by men, and that's toxic, that's problematic. We can't have that. Women are being damsels in distress, things like that, and they don't like that at all. Which, I mean, there was one video I made real recently where I commented on this a little bit, and essentially what I said was, hey, look, there are some fairy tales out there that feature men rescuing women. Get over it. But there are also some fairy tales out there that feature women saving men. But you don't really hear about those at all. I mean, Hansel and Gretel, the Snow Queen. I mean, the fairy tale of the Snow Queen. Now, I have 2 books that I've written and have published. I'm going to have a 3rd one out. I don't know. I was originally hoping by the end of this year, but I always seem to be busy. I'm thinking it's probably going to be next year. But I have 2 books here. First one's called The Fleeing Company. Second book is called The Tempter's Bane. First 2 installments of the Drifter's Road fantasy book series. But the fairy tale, the Snow Queen, it's a pretty big influence in my books. I mean, I have a company of 6 characters that are essentially going on an adventure. Their first major adventure, spans these 2 books, Fleeing Company and Tempter's Bane, and then the 3rd book's going to mark their second major adventure. But what I'll say regarding the Snow Queen is that the villain in the 3rd book, she's heavily influenced by the Snow Queen in Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale. And I would say one of my characters, Katrin, her name, she's influenced quite a bit by Gerda from the Snow Queen. But I mean, that's a story where you have a woman saving a man, or well, I forget exactly how old Kay and Gerda were, but I think they were both kids, so I guess not man and woman, it's a girl saving a boy, but you get the point. But my greater point here is that, fairy tales, they all get painted as, women are just damsels in distress. Fairy tales are where women are being saved by men, and the people who say that sort of thing, I can tell they haven't read very many stories. I mean, there are a number of fairy tales out there where it's the other way around. There's, and then of course, you have some fairy tales where you don't have anybody getting rescued by anybody. But people like Rachel Zegler, Gal Gadot, they've been emphasizing that Snow White is not going to be saved by a prince. It goes back to this sort of feminist mindset that fairy tales are, women are usually damsels in distress being saved by men, which is, in their minds, toxic, problematic, a bunch of other words like that. But again, I mean, you've got other fairy tales that have women saving men that you don't really see getting mentioned that much. I mean, it's not that some fairy tales are misogynist and some fairy tales are feminist. Rather, it's their fairy tales. Some happen to have men saving women, some happen to have women saving men, some happen to have neither. I mean, the real problem, I think, is that you've got people out there who are constantly and actively searching for political messages or social messages in places where they simply do not exist. I mean, not all art is political, but I'll tell you, all art sure is politicized. Okay, so the article continues. Now, The Telegraph has an interview with David Hand, who worked as a designer for Disney in the 1990s, and whose father, also named David Hand, was one of the directors of the original film. Hand doesn't directly criticize Zegler, but unloads pretty heavily on the film, which obviously has not yet been seen by anyone outside the studio, even in the trailer room. I don't think we need to see it. We already know what's going to happen. It's a whole different concept, and I just totally disagree with it. And I know my dad and Walt would also very much disagree with it, Hand said. He called it a disgrace that Disney is trying to do something new with something that was such a great success earlier. Yeah, I mean, if something's working, why would you change it? Their thoughts are just so radical now. They change the stories, they change the thought process of the characters, they're making up new woke things, and I'm just not into any of that. I find it quite frankly a bit insulting what they may have done with some of these classic films. There's no respect for what Disney did and what my dad did. I think Walt and he would be turning in their graves. And he makes a real good point right here. There's no respect for what Disney did and what my dad did. Again, the people at Disney, the people in Hollywood, they are not entertainers. They are activists. And one thing about them is they have no respect for anything that came out before them. They have no respect for the past at all. They have no respect for classic stories that people have come to love. You know, in their mind, stories from the past are very white and very male. Stories from the past, you know, feature women being damsels in distress, being rescued by men, you know, and a bunch of other things like that. And they feel they need to change those things, or they need to correct those things, or what have you. And I'm going to end this with just a very simple common sense question here. These people that are in entertainment right now, and in this case, these people who are working on the Snow White movie, if they really were fans of the original Snow White movie, then why are they trying to change it? Why are they making changes to it? Why are they, as David Ham puts it, why are they trying to do something new with something that was such a great success earlier? And I mean, the answer to that's very simple. Because they're not fans. They don't like these stories that they're adapting. In fact, I think they absolutely despise them. Again, these people in Hollywood, in the entertainment industry, they are not entertainers, they are activists. Their priority is not to make fun stories that people will enjoy. Their priority is to inject their woke ideology into stories, their left-wing ideology, their feminist ideology, you know, their identity politics. Their priority is to take everything that they get their hands on and turn it into a platform for their ideology. That's it. I mean, I'm just calling a spade when I say that. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, if you consider hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care until then.